All right, welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today. As focused learners, we often realize that the everyday things we completely take for granted usually have the most fascinating, complex systems running quietly right under our noses. Well, today our goal is to demystify a really specific framework, the SASB requirements for drug retailers. We are going to explore the invisible mechanisms and those rigorous accounting standards that are actively keeping our local pharmacies safe and holding massive retail chains accountable.
It's kind of funny. It's a question we rarely actually ask ourselves, right? When you pick up a prescription, how do you know it's safe? We just blindly trust the little plastic bottle handed to us over the counter. But the reality? The medication supply chain is incredibly long and incredibly complex. We're talking about massive distribution networks sitting right in between the manufacturers and the retailers. And with all that complexity comes some pretty serious vulnerability to risks that, honestly, if left unmanaged, could end up right in your own bathroom cabinet.
So, here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll cover the hidden pharmacy risk, measuring supply chain integrity, qualitative defenses, quantitative metrics, the private label distinction, and finally, the investor and consumer takeaway. Let's just dive right in.
Okay, Section 1, the hidden pharmacy risk.
Now, ensuring the quality and safety of pharmaceutical products, it isn't just a nice-to-have. It is absolutely crucial to preserving brand value for these huge companies and obviously protecting us, the customers. Failing to manage this supply chain effectively exposes a drug retailer to massive costs related to recalls and, frankly, catastrophic risks to the public. According to the SASB standard, the primary threat here is what they call compromised drugs. And listen, this doesn't just mean a pill that slipped past its expiration date. A compromised drug includes medications that are recalled or are of substandard quality because of a health hazard, mislabeling, improper packaging, potential contamination, or even just poor manufacturing. It also explicitly includes counterfeit drugs, drugs sold under a product name without proper authorization. These counterfeits might literally lack the active ingredient entirely or have way too much of it, or just feature incredibly convincing fake packaging that tricks you into thinking it's the authentic, approved product.
Moving on to Section 2, measuring supply chain integrity.
So, what does this all mean? How do we actually bring transparency to this terrifyingly complex supply web? Well, investors rely on standard reporting metrics. It brilliantly illustrates exactly what this framework looks like on paper. The SASB, Sustainability Accounting Standard, actually dedicates an entire row strictly to drug supply chain integrity. This establishes the absolute industry baseline for what a company must publicly report regarding their supply chain security.
And what's fascinating here is how the standard is designed. Savvy investors evaluate a company using a highly effective two-pronged approach. First, there's the tell. These are the qualitative defenses, basically the descriptions of their preventative efforts and policies. But look, investors don't just take their word for it. They contrast this with the show, the quantitative metrics, which is the hard data of reactive product safety recalls. They listen to the promises, sure, but they always verify those promises with the actual incident data.
All right, Section 3, qualitative defenses, or prevention efforts.
Under the standard, a retailer has to clearly describe their corporate security system for mitigating compromised drugs. So, the crucial point is exactly how retailers document these defenses. The standard dictates they must detail their qualitative efforts, things like rigorous vendor inspections, deep supply chain audits, advanced traceability and barcode tracking systems, and, of course, pharmacist and employee training programs. They also have to implement alert systems, customer feedback tools, and even coordinate directly with law enforcement. Essentially, these are the locks and cameras of their security system. It demonstrates active, ongoing vigilance.
Which brings us to Section 4, quantitative metrics, the hard data. Because let's be real, even with the absolute best qualitative defenses in the world, breaches still happen. And when those efforts fail, investors need to check the alarm log. The very first hard data requirement is reporting the total number of product safety recalls issued during the reporting period for the drugs the entity actually retails. This covers pharmaceutical prescription products as well as your everyday over-the-counter medications. And it includes both voluntary recalls initiated by the company itself and those legally mandated by regulatory authorities to pull a product due to actual or potential adverse health consequences.
Actually, scratch that. We need to be a bit more precise here. The standard strictly excludes what are known as market withdrawals. A market withdrawal is really just a minor correction or normal stock rotation. Investors aren't sounding the alarm just because a pharmacy is rotating out last season's unsold cough drops, right? They are looking for genuine, legal safety failures.
Then, the second quantitative metric really zeroes in on the scale of the problem. Companies must report the total units recalled. I mean, it's one thing to say you had 3 recalls. It is entirely another thing to reveal that those 3 recalls affected millions of drug product units available for sale. Investors absolutely need to know the sheer volume of units that were actually subject to these safety recalls. It's the only way to understand the true financial and reputational exposure they're dealing with.
Next up, Section 5, the private label distinction. Within the retail space, there's a rapidly growing segment that carries totally unique risks, and that's store brand products. Because a pharmacy takes on a completely different level of responsibility when they put their own name on a bottle. So the final quantitative metric requires companies to disclose the specific percentage of those total recalled units that were private label products. That means any product containing the entity's own brand name and label, whether a third-party vendor manufactured it or they made it in their own facilities. This specific percentage tells us exactly how the retailer's in-house brands are performing compared to the big national brands they stock.
And this distinction loops right back into the qualitative side as well. Under the standard, retailers must explicitly discuss whether their practices to identify compromised drugs differ between their private label products and national brand products. Basically, do they audit their own store brand suppliers as rigorously as they audit external national brands? The standard literally forces them to put that answer on the record.
Finally, Section 6, the investor and consumer takeaway.
So why does this highly structured accounting standard actually matter to you and me? Ultimately, it forces operational excellence that protects the consumer's health while simultaneously providing the transparency needed to protect an investor's portfolio from unseen liabilities. For instance, for truly notable recalls, we're talking those affecting a massive number of units or involving serious illnesses or fatalities, companies provide an even deeper level of transparency. They have to detail the exact description and cause of the issue, the direct financial cost to remedy it, the corrective actions they've implemented, and any significant outcomes like legal proceedings or, tragically, fatalities. This gives stakeholders a crystal clear, unvarnished view of the real-world consequences of supply chain failures.
So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Next time you're standing in the pharmacy aisle and you reach for that store brand medication, will you wonder about its audit trail? Behind that simple plastic bottle is a massive, highly documented journey of barcode scans, vendor inspections, and quantitative recall tracking. It's a complex web for sure, but thanks to these specific accounting standards, it's one that is becoming far more transparent and a whole lot safer for all of us. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.